Hello book people, PT here. I want to talk to you today about a new favorite writer of mine and two of the books that I've read by her recently. The writer is Nnedi Okorafor and the books are Who Fears Death and Lagoon. On the surface, they're very different books. They've got a lot of differences in scope and genre, but I think when you look at them both together, they share a common theme, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So first I want to talk about Who Fears Death. This was the first book by Nnedi Okorafor that I read, and it's my favorite book I've read so far this year, and probably even going into last year. I don't think I read a better book last year. It does take place in like a post-apocalyptic future kind of thing, but because of it does involve magic and some of the fantasy conventions that are used, I would really categorize it as a fantasy. The subject matter is at times very difficult to read. It's pretty violent in a lot of ways. Basically, the story of the book is that there are these two groups of people in this post-apocalyptic land in Africa somewhere, where in the east there is a lighter skinned group of people, and in the west there's a darker skinned group of people. The lighter skinned group are kind of performing a genocidal war against the darker skinned people, where they're taking some of them slaves, but also just wiping a lot of them out. And one of the big weapons they're using to wipe out the other race is rape. So that's definitely a big part of the book, and a lot of tough scenes to read. But our hero is the child of one of those rapes, and in the culture she grows up in the darker skinned culture, and in that culture the children of rape, because their conception was so violent, it's assumed that they are going to turn out to be very violent people, and they're kind of shunned for that reason, that they just have a corrupt spirit. It basically is the idea behind it. So our young hero is a young woman who grows up under that circumstance, and it turns out she has a lot of talent for magic, but she can't get like the local magic teacher guy to train her, because first of all she's a woman, but also she because of the way she was conceived. So there's some struggles there, but as time goes on and she does eventually start to grow her skills, she finds out she has a bigger role to play in the world kind of events. I'm not going to go any further than that, because there are some really neat surprises and twists and story revelations in this book, but just suffice it to say, you should read it. Nnedi Okorafor has an amazing writing style that's not like flowery or showy, but is also, she just puts together some beautiful sentences in a way that always serves the story and always moves it forward, and I just love this book. The second book, Lagoon, is the story that takes place in modern times. Basically a spaceship lands in the ocean just off the coast of an African city, and one of the alien creatures comes up on the shore basically and takes the form of a young woman, and kind of draws a few people to herself, a few local people, and the story is kind of around the way the world and the local people especially are kind of reacting to what's going on with these strange visitors, and kind of the plan of the aliens, and the way that it kind of disrupts the town, first of all, but the way then the implications are the way it's going to kind of disrupt the world. So also a very good book. So on the one hand, you've got Who Fears Death, which is very epic, takes place over a long period of time, is more of a fantasy, takes place in a lot of locations, is just kind of a very epic story. On the other hand, you have Lagoon, which is not nearly as epic. It takes place over a very short period of time in one city, and is more of almost like a Twilight Zone episode kind of feel to it, where it kind of feels like it's all one event. So on the surface, very different books, but the theme that they share in common, I think, is that they're both involve kind of a young woman who is an agent of change. Not that this is unique. There are certainly lots of stories where the hero is kind of an agent of change, but I would say the majority of stories that I tend to read, the hero is the person trying to stop the agent of change. So if you think about like any kind of detective story, any kind of like police type story, your hero is the person who is like trying to maintain the status quo, and the villain is like the killer or whatever who's coming in trying to disrupt society, and our hero is trying to stop them, trying to keep things on an even keel, keep the status quo. And I think really probably the majority of literature is like that. If you think of even something like Lord of the Rings, you know, it's the Frodo and friends are trying to destroy the ring in order to maintain the status quo in the world and stop the evil forces from taking over. There are certainly plenty of exceptions, you know, things, even something like Star Wars, you know, they're trying to overthrow the status quo, overthrow the government. But I think, you know, that's more the exception than the rule, I would say. And I do like stories where the hero is our agent of change. More specifically in these stories, and what kind of made me see the connection really between these two, is that in both stories, it's like the society around our hero, our agent of change, is not only like reluctant to accept the changes that this person is trying to bring about, but are almost like offended by the fact that they would try to bring about these changes. And in both circumstances, the society is not necessarily happy with the way things are. They don't necessarily like it, but they're kind of the attitude of like, well, what are you gonna do? Kind of thing. And our hero, our agent of change, is coming in and saying, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna fix it right now. And in both cases, you know, society is a little bit offended by that, like a little shocked, a little perplexed. And in both cases, the hero has like kind of a group of friends who are kind of around her to sort of help her, but even they, in both cases, get their faith kind of put to the test when they see the scope of the change that the agent of change is going to bring about. It was just interesting to me the way those two stories kind of worked together, even though on the surface they're very, very different. Either way, all that aside, I think you should definitely be reading Nnedi Okorafor if you have not already. By the way, I think I've said her name 2 to 3 different ways, so my apologies for that. But you should definitely be reading her. She's an amazing author doing some great work right now. So if you do read either of those or have read either of those, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.